Hi, guys, and welcome to Whole Heart Transformation. My name is Melissa Alguera, if you are new around here, and I'm excited that you've decided to join me today. I want to talk to you about rebuilding after infidelity if you have experienced it. Now, listen, there's a couple things to this, okay? Because when we're trying to rebuild, we're either rebuilding ourselves because there was something devastating that happened to us as the betrayed, which is very complex and nuanced, and there's a lot that has to go into healing yourself after you've been betrayed. But then there's also, if you're staying, the relational healing that has to happen if you're staying with the person that betrayed you. So the betrayer has to show up in a certain way in order for there to be healing with the betrayed and in the relationship. And if the betrayed is not staying, then there's certain things that have to happen as well to rebuild self. Now, if you're staying in the relationship, you've got to rebuild self and the relationship, and that's very complex. So that's where I really want to focus today. That is the majority of my work. I work with mostly couples and individuals that are trying to heal from betrayal trauma, but mostly working towards rebuilding connection in the coupleship. Of course, I work with people who don't stay together as well, but a lot of the work that I do is with people who try to stay together because that's the majority of the people that I see. That's the majority of people in general. They want to make their relationship work. So how do we rebuild after infidelity? Well, there's a couple things that we need to establish when we're looking to rebuild. The first thing that we're looking for is that the betrayer has shared all of the information. There is no hidden information. So what do I mean by that? I mean that basically they have shared all of the acting out behavior in the marriage and maybe even possibly before the marriage if there was some sort of porn or sexual addiction. Why do we do this? Why do we say that all of the information needs to be disclosed? Well, we say this because, first of all, the betrayed partner needs to know what has happened in their relationship that they are not aware of. They need to know the reality. The second reason is the betrayer needs to face the reality, to not minimize it, because the only way that a person could act this way and do these things is if they've been minimizing the reality. And this is very common for people who betray, who have that duality. They minimize the reality so they can continue to do the behavior and keep it a secret and deny what's really going on within themselves and with how they're impacting other people. So full disclosure has to happen. And I recommend that therapeutically because most of the time there's details that are left out. And then if more information comes out later, there's more trauma that happens to the betrayed partner. So we want that information to be given therapeutically. And I have some people I could recommend you to. If you decide that you want to do that, you can even, put this in the comments that you're looking for that. I don't do many full disclosures just because it's very time consuming. And really the people that I'm wanting to help the most are people who are wanting to heal and get on that journey. And they're kind of past that beginning phase. Now, not to say that there aren't people that I work with that are in the beginning. Of course, I work with them and I love to work with people in those phases. But when we're talking about betrayal and trying to help the relationship, I like to work with people who are already past full disclosure and really they've been stuck in the process. They're not really integrating their marriage now. They're having a difficulty on moving forward together and that rebuilding that connection. That's really where my work comes in. It's something I love to do is bring that integration while we've already established what happened and we're moving forward together. Now, even for betrayed partners, often, they're in and out for a long time. And this is very normal. They're, 1 minute they're like, okay, I'm all in. And then the next minute they're not all in. And this is just kind of that back and forth that they experience for a while. And the reason for that back and forthness is a couple things. If the betrayer is not emotionally showing up well, if they're not consistent in how they're attuning, how they're empathizing, then that's going to be one of the things that keeps the betrayed vacillating in the relationship. Because in order to rebuild, there has to be empathy stability, there has to be attunement, there has to be consistency and safety. And so if those things are not being established by the betrayer, then this is going to be very difficult to rebuild. So let's talk about some of those things that I mentioned. One of the things that I find to be incredibly difficult for people who betray is empathy and the ability and capacity to sit with the reality of how their behavior has impacted the betrayed. And the reason for this is because, well, you guessed it, they haven't been facing reality for a really long time, the betrayer, okay? So, in order to sit with reality, you have to face all of it. And it's going to take time. Like you've been, maybe if you're the betrayer, you've been shredding your own reality for years and decades and however long. And this is probably a pattern that you learned in childhood. Maybe you learned it from your parents. Maybe you learned it from watching pornography, whatever that is that has established that for you, that type of pattern. That is what is going to lead you to not be able to be there for your partner when they share pain, because the reality is not something you want to face. That doesn't feel comfortable, normal, right? And so how we change that is when you start to dismiss your partner, okay, you need to start noticing that, being aware of that you're going into the whole deflecting, like, oh, I did do that, but I'm not that way now. That is taking your partner's reality, of the reality that they weren't aware of, that you were aware of for years and decades. And you're saying, oh, well, I'm not that person anymore. No, your partner has to be able to process the person that you've been. And if you push that down, if you minimize that, if you try to deflect by not sitting with that reality, what you're going to do is you're going to tell them and their body that they are not safe with you going forward. So safety starts with the ability to sit with their reality and not try to change it, because this is their reality. Now listen, many betrayers, they get enmeshed with a betrayed's experience. So let me give you an example of what that looks like. So what that looks like is the betrayed partner says, you didn't love me, you didn't care for me, and you want to fix that. You want to say, no, that's not true, I did love you. And that's really where we get sidetracked often for the betrayed, because the betrayed needs to be able to have their reality and just let it be validated. Now, for many betrayers, that feels very scary, because you're like, what if I validate it? Then they're going to really believe that. It's not that. It's already felt for them. They already believe this. So if you can validate it and say something like, yeah, it makes sense that you don't feel like I love you because I did this, this, and this. So the more that you can sit with it and not try to change it, is you're going to give them a safety and stability to process their emotions. And betrayeds need the help to process emotion, because they often are lost in their amygdala. They're often lost in the trauma brain of the betrayal. And so how we help betrayeds get out of that is by getting back to their body and getting into the emotion. But if you're trying to fix their, whatever their trauma brain is saying, oh, you didn't love me, oh, you didn't care about me, I didn't matter, whatever that was, and you're trying to fix that for them, you're literally trying to stop them in their tracks and like minimize what they have experienced. And what that will do is cause them to heighten. I mean, have you ever been in that experience with them where, you're like, no, I didn't do that. No, that's not what happened. And then all of a sudden they're getting angrier and more frustrated. Yes, because you're trying to approach them in the wrong way. So the best way to do this is to just validate their experience and then empathize with them in that place. And this will give them some of that safety and stability as well, if you can empathize with them. So empathy is the ability to find something in myself that can connect to the other person. Now, if you've got shame, empathy is not going to be present, because now we're going to be hiding behind, I'm so bad. So the ability to sit with their pain is going to have to be coming from a deeper place, where you set aside the shame and you deal with the shame and you heal that shame. So one of the things I like to say for many betrayers is how you can set aside that shame is if you can listen to your partner, and if you can picture them as a friend telling you about the pain that they have experienced, and you can respond to them from that place. So you're kind of having to separate yourself out of it so you can be present with them. So it looks like this. So if I were to be the betrayer and I would be sitting with my betrayed partner and they're sharing their pain with me, if I say to them, no, like that's not true. Like I loved you and I didn't want to do that. Then we're not going to be able to step into empathy. We're trying to be seen instead of seeing the person on the other end. So that's the first piece. Okay. But if I sit with it and I go, "Well, gosh, if this was a friend telling me this right now, how would I respond?" Most likely, I would respond with anger. I'd be like, "I'm angry on your behalf. Like, you should have never had to experience that. You're an incredible person. This should have never happened. I feel so sad for you because you were loving, you were kind." Okay, do you see where I'm going with this? So, if you can picture your partner as a friend when they're sharing, that is sharing this with you, maybe not you as a person that harmed them in that moment, to empathize, then that will be a way that you can sit in that pain with them and then you don't get lost in the shame. The next thing that you're going to need to do within the safety and stability is deal with your shame in a way that expresses what's happening on the inside of you, okay? So shame is going to come. That's the reality for you. You've done a lot of things that have caused shame, and then you've come into the relationship with childhood pain and trauma that you haven't dealt with. And so all that is true. And so one of the things that you can do in that moment when you're feeling shame is get back to your body. Sit with your body and notice what sensations are happening inside and express to your partner that you might be feeling shame right now. Listen, I am giving you some golden tools. Some of this stuff I go over in the Betrayer to Heart Healer course, which will be available next year to purchase in 2026. So keep a lookout for that because it is gold. I created this out of my own need for help and support. And this is what I do with all of my couples that help them get on the trajectory of really healing and coming back together and integrating their relationship. Okay, I digress. So what you're going to do is when you're feeling the shame, you're going to tell your partner, "Please hold on for a second. I'm feeling shame." Let them know instead of stonewalling, going frozen, because these two things right here tell your partner that you don't care. You're not listening when you stonewall and when you freeze. When you freeze, when you stonewall, you usually are unresponsive, which causes a betrayed partner to escalate in their anger. So what you can do is by, helping this process is let them know what's happening on the inside of you. The next thing that you can do is when your partner is sad, angry, upset, and or they seem distant, you attune to that. So what you're going to do is you're going to lean in instead of moving away from it. Many betrayers tell me, "Oh, I don't want to bring it up because I don't want to have any problems when things are good." Listen. No, they are feeling this. They are already thinking about it. It does not go away. This is the difference between betrayal trauma and PTSD. Betrayal trauma is always present in the mind. And so if you're not addressing it, and they have to keep addressing it, that makes them more vulnerable to have to deal with this. And gosh, there's so much shame for a betrayed partner in that. So if you, as the betrayer, come up and you address it and you say, "Hey, I'm noticing that you're being distant. I notice you look sad." If you actually address it with them, then that will give them relief. Like, "You see me, you care." And that's called attunement, my friend. Attunement is noticing and naming what you see in your partner. And then after you notice and name, you can say, "Am I getting that right? Are you sad? Are you angry? What is it?" And then that gives them the capacity to be vulnerable enough to share maybe what's going on the inside of them, instead of them having to come to you and be so humble and like deal with that on their own. They're already feeling so rejected. I mean, can you imagine if you were sitting on their side of this, okay, feeling rejected, feeling so betrayed, so hurt, and then you have to come to the person that harmed you and ask for help? I mean, how crazy is that? That expectation of the betrayer on the betrayed. So it would be better for you to be growing in your attachment, not going into avoidance, but moving in towards secure attachment and asking them what they are feeling and what they are needing, or naming it, seeing and naming it. And this is a tool that you can use for the rest of your life. And this is how you build secure attachment. So you're moving in instead of avoiding. You're moving in instead of running away. You're moving in instead of going, radio silent, and then your betrayed partner is left to deal with all the pain. The next thing that you need to do is be consistent in this, okay? Now, I understand This is going to be difficult at first. You're going to waver. There's going to be times where you're triggered. The point of the fact of the matter is that your job here is to change how your nervous system has naturally been. Your nervous system says, move away from connection, move away from vulnerability, move away from authenticity. Okay. So that's what you've been consistent in. And trust me, your betrayed partner is looking for that. They are looking to see, are you going to be consistent? Are you going to be inconsistent? What do I have to hold on to? Is there anything that I have to hold on to here? If you are consistent in avoidance, you're going to lose your marriage. You're going to lose the relationship that you desperately want to keep. So what you're going to have to do is go against the grain of what you're used to. And so moving in consistently is going to have to be what you do. Okay, and even if you say to your partner, gosh, I'm so scared to move in towards you right now. I'm afraid to be vulnerable, but I'm going to do it. Even if you say it out loud, it would be better to do that than to not be consistent in showing up for them. So the more consistent that you are, the more your partner is going to go, okay, I can trust this. And so these are just some of the things that you can do as the betrayer to rebuild after infidelity. Now, for the betrayed partner, what can you do? Well, first of all, you're going to have solid boundaries. Solid boundaries, meaning that your boundaries, you understand, boundaries are not boundaries without consequences. They are walls, and walls people can walk around. So the more consistent that you are in your boundaries that say, I'm not going to tolerate, cheating. I'm not going to tolerate pornography. I'm not going to tolerate emotional abuse. The more that you can establish that, the better off you're going to feel, the more empowered you're going to feel. And for a while, your boundaries might be a bit controlling or rigid, and that's okay. In the beginning, that is what you need. You might need rigid boundaries in the beginning. I know for me, the boundaries that I had were very rigid. And I even had a therapist tell me, well, he might slip. And I'm like, I don't care. Like, I am not going to be able to tolerate that. I am so devastated, so traumatized by what he did that there is no wiggle room here. And you know what? For many people, they'll say, oh, well, that might cause them to hide. If it does, then the relationship's over, period. So the point of the matter is that the boundaries might have to be very clear and rigid for a long time. Well, they always need to be clear, but very rigid for a long time. And then over time, you can maybe loosen some of those things up. And I'm not talking about betrayal stuff. I'm talking about other boundaries. The next thing that you need to have is emotional boundaries, meaning when your partner doesn't show up for you emotionally, you actually respond to them from a place that is of consequence. So one of the things that I mention, and I say this a lot, when Malachi was not showing up for me emotionally and he was leaving me out to dry every time, he was stonewalling, he was falling asleep, he was shutting down because of his own shame and his inability to sit with me in a securely attached way. I was like, fine. I'm not going to tolerate this. So I got a trundle bed in my son's room and I put a bed in there, and I would go in there whenever he would stonewall, not show up, or deflect. There was no more room for me to be emotionally abandoned. I was devastated, traumatized, and I didn't have the space to deal with that crap. So once I got that trundle bed, let me tell you, things changed pretty quickly with him after that. It was grueling for a few months because I would have to go and then I wouldn't be met, until the next day. But the more that I showed him that I wasn't going to tolerate it and I was going to go into the other room and sleep, the more pain he had to feel and endure and had to decide, is this what I want? And so eventually he decided, this isn't what I want, and I'm going to quickly respond to her instead of shutting down. And one of the ways that he did that was by telling me that he was going into shame, and then he would get back to the five senses, and that would help him to be able to show up for me. So that's one of the two things that I would like to see when you're a betrayed partner, is those two types of boundaries, that you would establish those two types of boundaries when you've gone through betrayal. The next thing as a betrayed partner, in order to rebuild after infidelity, and you may not like this, is not to do the rage. I understand there are parts of you that say, I deserve this. Listen, I was one of these people. I was like, I deserve to rage on him and he deserves everything that I give him. Well, the problem is that he became hypervigilant after a period of time with me. And I started to notice that he was dissolving as a person. And I was like, is this how I want to build connection with him? Because this doesn't feel good for me. It doesn't feel good for me to rage. It doesn't feel good to look at him and see him dissolve as a person. And yeah, surprisingly, yeah, that's how I ended up feeling. Like I didn't like that. I wanted to rebuild connection. I didn't want to create a weakness in my husband who was already feeling so much shame for what he had done and already really having to overcome trauma that he didn't know that he had. So there was a point in our marriage where I had to decide, am I going to continue to rage at him and lose any hope of connection or attachment? Or should I leave? And so I decided that I was not going to go off on him anymore. And I was actually going to try to share for the part of me that was so angry instead of from it. So the difference is I would say something like this. So from it would be, you're this, you're that, and I'm going off. But for it would look like this. I would say, man, this part of me really wants to go off on you. This part of me wants to call you names. I'm not going to do that, but I want you to know this part feels so strong on the inside of me. And it could just explode if I let it, but I'm not going to. But I want you to know this is how this part of me feels. And even as I say that, I can take a deep breath because that felt so much better and felt so much more true to my authentic self. So raging over time is not going to establish anything for you as a betrayed. You're only going to off leash this anger and then like get some of that pressure off and then have maybe some dopamine hits from that. But long term, that is going to diminish your identity because now you become an angry, bitter person and you've taught your brain and your body that's the way to go with it. And that's not healthy. So you want to be able to stop that in order to rebuild after infidelity. The next thing that you need to do as a betrayed partner is get your own support and help. You cannot overcome this on your own. I'm sorry. That's not the reality. This trauma has wiped you out probably worse than what the betrayer had. And I know that's hard to hear, but if you deny yourself of the real healing that you deserve, you're not going to heal. You're going to stay stuck in survival brain. And then guess what's going to happen from that place? Your marriage will probably end because as your betrayer is getting healed and they're becoming more of a heart healer, and you're not healing, then you're not going to see them in the person that they are now and the change that they've had. So getting yourself established in healing your betrayed part so you can start integrating them and you can start hearing your core self and your gut again. If you don't do that, then you're going to be left in that survival place and your betrayed parts are really going to rule here. So these are some of the things that you can start doing to rebuild and start healing the trauma that you've experienced and healing the marriage. It is very possible to rebuild. It's a beautiful thing when you can build something totally new. And if that sounds like something you want to do, then look, I've got courses, I've got webinars that are going all the time, and I want to get you on that healing journey. And if you want to coach with me, you can also go to identitylife.coach and see where I have availability. It's pretty slim at times, but I have a wait list and sometimes you can get in with that. All right, you guys, I hope this has given you some hope today and how to rebuild. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.